Leonard Mayfield wasn't the kind of CEO who made a big entrance. Recently appointed to lead Norjet Airlines, he skipped the usual press rollout. No headlines, no attention. Instead, he quietly booked a commercial flight under a different name, just him, a carry-on, and a desire to see how his company actually treated people. He dressed simply slacks, an open-collar shirt, no soutane blended in easily. No one would have guessed he now ran the airline, and that's exactly how he wanted it. Leonard believed that real leadership meant seeing the truth unfiltered. That day, as he settled into his business class seat, he wasn't there to be recognized. He was there to observe, to understand. But what he didn't expect was how quickly the flight would shift from silent observation to something deeply personal. Something that would not only test his patience, but force him to face a system he'd been chosen to fix. At first, Leonard brushed it off. Maybe she was just having a rough day, but the pattern became clear. The flight attendant, Kendra, smiled easily at the older couple across the aisle, offering them champagne and warm towels. When she turned to Leonard, the tone shifted. No eye contact, no greeting. Just a clipped, "You need something?" he asked for a ginger ale. She returned 10 minutes later with a cup of warm water and a napkin, dropping it onto his tray without a word. The man next to Leonard looked up, startled, but said nothing. Leonard remained calm, though he felt the weight of a familiar silent zone where people notice something wrong but choose not to speak. Then came the comment. As Kendra passed by again, she muttered, "Some people sure know how to dress up and fake their way into first class." It was quiet, but clear. Leonard turned to look at her, not with anger but quiet acknowledgement. He said nothing. She smirked and moved on. Leonard leaned back, exhaled slowly, and reminded himself why he was here. He hadn't revealed who he was not yet, but the truth had a way of surfacing, and so would he. The cabin remained quiet, but the tension sat thick in the air. Leonard kept his eyes forward, hands folded in his lap, but others had started to notice. A younger woman in row 3 gave Kendra a puzzled look as she passed, while a man in a suit subtly shook his head. Still, no one said a word. It wasn't until meal service began that things took a turn. Kendra reached Leonard's row, handed trays to the others, then paused. "We're out," she said flatly, holding nothing. Leonard looked up calmly. "Out of what?" "Out of patience," she snapped, and before anyone could react, she leaned in and whispered something Leonard couldn't ignore. When he asked her to repeat it, she rolled her eyes. "What? You gonna make a scene?" Leonard stayed seated, voice steady. "Number, I don't need to." Her expression twisted with frustration. Then, in a moment that would echo far beyond this flight, she slapped him. Audible gasps filled the cabin. A tray clattered to the floor. Leonard didn't move, didn't raise his voice. He simply turned to face her and said, "You just made a choice." His tone was calm, controlled, but everything had shifted. Every eye was now on them. And this time, the silence wouldn't last. Before anyone could process what had just happened, another flight attendant rushed over this one older, more composed. "Is everything okay here, sir?" she asked, clearly alarmed. Leonard remained calm. "No," he replied, "but it will be." The senior attendant's eyes scanned the scene: Kendra's red face, the frozen passengers, the soundless tension that hung in the air. She leaned closer. I think I know who you are," she whispered, her tone shifting. Leonard gave a small nod. "I hoped that wouldn't matter." Moments later, she disappeared behind the curtain to make a discreet phone call. Within minutes, the flight crew had been alerted. The pilot was notified. Kendra stood stiff near the galley, pale now, realizing something was very wrong. Whispers began to ripple through the cabin. Someone up front checked a news article on their phone. Another mouthed the words, "Oh my God." And then it clicked, the man in seat 3C wasn't just another business traveler, he was Leonard Mayfield, the new CEO of Norjet Airlines. The same airline that was flying this very plane. And just like that, the story changed. So did the room. By the time the plane began its descent, the entire cabin had shifted. No one was talking loudly, but the atmosphere was electric with realization and regret. Leonard sat quietly, flipping through his book as if nothing had happened. Kendra stayed near the back, avoiding all eye contact. But the damage was done, and not just to her reputation. A passenger in row 6 had recorded part of the exchange on their phone. They hadn't captured the slap, but the tone, the tension, and Leonard's quiet composure spoke volumes. Within hours of landing, that clip, just 30 seconds long, was posted online. The caption read, "They didn't know who he was, they just assumed." It went viral overnight. Hashtags began trending. Major news outlets picked it up. Norjet's PR team scrambled to respond, but Leonard got ahead of it. He released a public statement the next morning. It wasn't angry, it wasn't defensive, it was honest. "This isn't about me," he wrote. "It's about what happens every day to people who don't have titles to protect them." He didn't demand Kendra's firing. He didn't threaten lawsuits. Instead, he asked for something much harder: reflection. Leonard didn't just talk, he followed through. Within days, he launched a company-wide audit of Norjet's internal culture. Not just surface-level training modules or corporate PR fluff, but real hands-on changes. He brought in third-party consultants to review hiring practices, promotion pathways, and especially how frontline staff were trained to treat passengers. More importantly, he opened the door to stories. Anonymous reporting systems were improved, employee listening sessions were scheduled, and most surprisingly, Leonard sat in on many of them. No camera crews, no speeches, just a CEO listening, pen in hand. One employee later wrote anonymously, "That man didn't come in to protect his ego, he came to protect people who've been ignored for too long." Kendra was placed on leave pending investigation. But Leonard never made her the center of the story. He refused to let the public turn one person into a scapegoat when the real issue ran deeper. "It's not about blame," he said in a team-wide video. "It's about awareness, and from awareness, we grow." For the first time in a long while, Norjet's team didn't just feel watched, they felt seen. Months later, the story of that flight still came up in interviews, in conferences, and in quiet conversations between co-workers. But Leonard never let it define him. Instead, he used it as fuel for something greater. Norjet's new employee orientation now included real-life case studies about unconscious bias. Cabin crew training emphasized emotional intelligence as much as emergency procedures. Diversity wasn't just a slide in a PowerPoint anymore, it was part of the company's heartbeat. Leonard never once mentioned Kendra's name publicly. He said, "People are more than their worst moment, but organizations can't grow if they pretend those moments don't happen." Outside the company, Leonard was invited to speak at leadership summits and universities. But no matter where he went, he stayed grounded. His favorite story to tell wasn't about his title, it was about the flight where he chose silence over anger and action over ego. "You don't need a seat in first class to matter," he told one audience, "but if you're lucky enough to have one, make sure you treat everyone else like they do too." The room went quiet. And then, it listened.